Hi everybody, welcome to our live event. My name is Brenda KB Anderson. I'm a designer and an instructor for crochet. And I'm very excited today to show you guys this cute little project we're gonna be working on. This is called the two-tone soap sack. So this is just a V-stitch pattern. It's a little tiny bit meshy. And then it's basically like a little bag to hold your soap. Here's a little bar of soap, but bar of soap fits inside of here, and then you can tuck the loop through this little hole, and then you're able to hang this in your shower, or you can hang it if you're traveling, you can hang it like on the outside of a backpack or something like that. So the inspiration behind this design comes from this article that I read a couple of years ago. This woman named Stacy Weiner had started a charity called SACK, S-A-C-K, which stands for Supporting a Community with Kindness. And the premise of this, the initiative here is to donate a bar of soap inside one of these little, it's basically can be used as a washcloth, but it also protects your soap. It gives your soap a place to, hang out in, keeps it from getting all gross as you travel, but this was meant to be given away to somebody who's in need. So you would bring it to food pantries or other places like that where you can find, where homeless people might be looking for a little bit of extra help. It's really important, when you're looking at charities, it's good to just kind of think about how this is going to be used and who's going to be using this in the future, and then you can kind of like funnel that into your project, right? And it makes you feel good about helping somebody, but this is a really small, very doable project, and that's one of the things that I really love about it is anybody can do this. It's a simple project to work on, and giving it away is just an extra bonus. So you might want to make one of these for yourself though, because they're really cute and they're useful, and you can hang them up in your shower. So it's kind of like a win-win. Make one for someone else and make one for yourself. So I did put a link in the download. So the download is free. It has all the instructions for this pattern. I did put a link in there to the charity that I've mentioned, SACK. So if you want to read a little bit more about that, they have lots of tips on that website. I put some links in there for that. But gives you suggestions on how to find places that you can donate these if you don't know of any off the top of your head. But it is a good idea to call those places ahead of time just to make sure that they would accept something like this, because a lot of places have very specific needs that they try and fill in. Some places they don't have a lot of room to keep extra stuff. So if you're thinking about donating a box of these or something, it's good to call ahead just to make sure that is something that would help the people that they're serving. So just keep that in mind. All right, well, I am glad that you guys are here. I saw in the comments already, Lori had left a message for me yesterday, Lori in Ohio. Hi, Lori, thank you for the kind words. I saw your message and your request. So a lot of times I will ask during my live events if people have other ideas or suggestions on things that they would like to make, and Lori has a suggestion for me, so you guys can keep an eye out for that. I am gonna write that down and that will show up at some point. It does take me a little while to design things and kind of get it in, get it into the schedule, but I will write that down, Lori, and I will work on that. So that sounds like a very good project. She is hoping for something like a balaclava or a ski mask because she lives in Ohio in a rural area, and it's very cold for her to walk the distance. It's about 1/10 of a mile out to get her mail. So I understand the cold weather thing because I live in Minnesota. It can get really cold here in the winter, so I get it. That would be useful for me too. So. All right, give me something to work on in the future. I'm excited about that. All right, so let's jump back into our project. So this project, you will be needing some dishcloth cotton or like a worsted weight, which is a number 4 cotton yarn. 100% cotton works the best. And I particularly like this brand of cotton. I put a link to the yarn in the download so you can see what I used. But the reason that I like this is because it's easier on my hands as I crochet it. But the extra bonus is that for somebody who is using this as a washcloth, it's nice and soft. It's not a scratchy cotton at all. It's not a stiff cotton at all. And it just has a lot of, it's nice and strong, comes in a million different colors. It's inexpensive, and it's soft. So that's why I added a link into your download for that. All right, so you're gonna need 2 different colors. The bottom color, I believe I called this color 1. Let me just see how yep, C1, which stands for color 1. You only need about 20 yards of this, so that would be the dark green in this case. And then you'll need about 60 yards of the color that's going to be on top. So in this case, this would be the lighter green color here, and the strap as well. And then you'll need a crochet hook to go along with that. And I'm going to be using a G hook, which is a 4mm hook, but you can use whatever hook size you need to in order to get gauge. And so the thing is, for gauge, this is such a tiny little project. I wouldn't bother, personally, would not bother making a separate gauge swatch. You can just start stitching as you go, and then you can measure after a couple of rows. I have a little measurement in there, so you have a little checkpoint to see if you're on track. And if it's working out, then just keep going, and then you can keep monitoring your gauge once you start working into this V-stitch pattern. But basically, you know, it doesn't have to fit the bar of soap exactly. It just needs to be a useful size, you know. So big enough for a bar of soap. And I actually did design this to be big enough for a box around a standard size bar of soap, because it's really nice to donate the soap in its original packaging. Sometimes the packaging is just a plastic, you know, like plastic film around the bar of soap itself, and that's no big deal. But if it does come in a box, I wanted people to be able to put the box inside that for gifting or for donating, so that way, you know, you could keep the original packaging intact. All right, so yeah, so you'll be using whatever hook size you need to in order to get gauge. If you feel like your piece is going to be turning out a little too big after you work a couple of rounds, then start over and switch to a smaller hook. If you feel like it's too small, it's really tight to get, you know, the hook into your stitches, it's not turning out large enough, then start over with a larger hook. So, but yeah, as far as materials, it's very, very minimal. So just a small amount of 2 different colors. And of course, you can do this all in one color if you like. I liked how it looked in 2 colors, and I also thought that this would be a helpful way to use up those dishcloth cotton scraps that you have laying around. So you don't need to make sure you have, you know, the full amount all in one color. You might have a couple of different balls of yarn just kind of laying around, half used up, and you can use them on these. Oh, I got a compliment on my top. Thank you so much. That was very sweet. This top I designed for a class, actually, that's available on Craftsy and also on the Creative Crochet Corner website. If you look underneath the classes section, it's the garland top is what it's called. And it's a really good introduction to making tops. If you've never made a garment before, it's pretty simple. It just has a bunch of little granny squares across the top and then some linen stitch going from the granny squares down. It's very straightforward, just in case anybody's thinking about maybe making it. All right, let's see. So we're gonna start out, I'm gonna be making one of these with the dark pink is gonna be my color 1, and then I'm gonna use light pink for my color number 2. And we're gonna start out by making a foundation chain of 11. So we're gonna chain 11. So you'll make your slip knot however you like to, and place that on your hook, and we're gonna start by chaining 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And then we're gonna work 1 row. So this is called a setup row, because after we work that 1 row, we're gonna start working in the round, and if that does not make sense, that's okay, we'll get there. But to begin working, we're gonna start working in the bottom of our chain. So if you take a look at the chain, and you'll see all those little V's all kind of in a row this way. If you roll that over so the V's are touching your table, then you can see all these little horizontal dashes on the back of your work. Those little dashes, that's where we're gonna work under. So I'm gonna skip the first horizontal dash, which is right here by my thumb, and I'm gonna go underneath the second one, which is right there. And I'm gonna make a single crochet. So we insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. Now there's 2 loops on our hook. We'll yarn over and pull through 2. That's our very first stitch, our first single crochet. And I'm gonna put a stitch marker in there. This is something that I especially like to tell people who are a little newer to crochet, because it can be hard to know where your last stitch is when you're working. It can be hard to just recognize that. So I will put a little stitch marker in there to show me that that was my very first stitch. And then we're going to do a single crochet into the back of each of these remaining chains, so into that little horizontal dash. So insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. Now there's 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, and pull through 2. So there's our second stitch. There's our third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And if you're finding those chains hard to get into, you may want to just unravel at this point because you are going to have to work into that chain a second time. And I know that when people first learn how to crochet, oftentimes we make that chain a little tight and then it's hard to get your hook in on the next row. So you could try doing it again with a larger hook just to make the chain and switch back to the G hook or whatever hook you're starting with after you make that original foundation chain. All right, so this is what our piece looks like so far. We just have 10 single crochet stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And now at this point, we're going to rotate our work and we're going to start working into the foundation chain once again, but into the opposite side. So we're not going to turn our work, but we're just going to kind of rotate it like this, like we're turning a steering wheel. We're just spinning it around. And now we're going to work into the bottom of that foundation chain, which was actually the top, but the opposite side, I should say. And we're going to work underneath both loops there. So we're going to do 2 single crochets into the first stitch. So this would be round 1 in your pattern. I'll pull that in real quick here. So the whole pattern is all written out here for you. We just did the setup row. Now we're working on round 1 in the single crochet section at bottom. So round 1 right here. So we're going to do a single crochet into that very first stitch, into that very first foundation chain, and another single crochet into the same spot. Okay, so there's going to be 2 single crochets worked into that very first foundation chain once you rotate your work. So 1, 2, and now we're going to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 8 chains. So they look like stitches, but they were from our original foundation chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And here is our very last foundation chain, and we're going to do 2 single crochets into that chain. So 1 and 2. And then we're going to turn our work and we're going to rotate that and we're going to begin working, we're going to continue working in a spiral here. So I'm going to remove that stitch marker. That was the very first single crochet we did in that setup row. And now we're going to do 2 single crochets into that stitch. So 1 and 2. Then we're going to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And here is our very last stitch. We're going to do 2 single crochets into that last stitch before we get to the end of the round here. So there's 2 single crochets in that last stitch. All right. And here we are at the beginning of our rounds here. So we're going to do 2 single crochets in that very first stitch. So 1 and 2. And I'm going to place the stitch marker back into that first stitch of the round. And then we're going to do a single crochet into each of the next 10 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we have 2 single crochets in the next stitch, 1 and 2. We rotate our work and we're just going to continue working in a circle here, working in a spiral. And we're going to repeat what we just did. So there's 2 single crochets here. And then we're going to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 10 stitches. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we're going to have 2 single crochets in the last stitch, 1 and 2. All right, so we have 28 stitches around, and you'll want to just go ahead and count that up just to make sure that you're on track, because from this point on, in the next round, we definitely need to have those 28 stitches, otherwise we're going to get a little confused. All right, so I'm going to remove that stitch marker that marks the very first stitch of the round, and here in this very first stitch we're going to make a slip stitch right there. This is the beginning of round number 1 of the V-stitch section. So we're down here now in the pattern. So we're going to do slip stitch into the first stitch, and then we're going to chain 2, and that's going to count as our very first stitch. So 1 and 2, that's going to count as a double crochet. Some people like to chain 3 here for their first double crochet, and you can certainly do that if you like. And then I'm going to place a double crochet into the very same stitch that we made that slip stitch join. So to do a double crochet, we'll yarn over, insert into that same spot, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And I'm going to put a stitch marker in that that second chain that we made. So that's the top of our beginning chain to remind us that that's the beginning of the round, but it's pretty obvious at this point where the beginnings of your rounds are, so you may not find that you need to have a stitch marker anymore. Okay, and then we're going to skip this next single crochet, and we're going to do 2 double crochets into the following single crochet. So 1 and 2. There's our 2 double crochets. We'll skip the next single crochet, and we'll place 2 double crochets into the following stitch. So 1 and 2, and we're just going to continue doing that all the way around. So we skip this stitch and then make 2 double crochets into the next stitch. 1 and 2, skip the stitch, 2 double crochets in the following stitch. 1 and 2, skip the stitch, double crochet into the next stitch. 1 and 2, skip the stitch, 2 double crochets into the next stitch. 1 and 2. So we're basically setting up our V-stitch stitch pattern here. Just continuing to skip to make 2 double crochets in every other stitch of this round here. And you can see it's starting to kind of cup. It doesn't want to lay flat anymore. So I'm going to just pop it in that direction. Oh, I should have mentioned too, once we finished with just that single crochet section before we started doing this V-stitch, that's when you can lay it flat on the table and you can measure from one side to the other and measure from this side to the other, and you can compare it to the measurements that I have listed under the gauge section. And then you can just see if yours is turning out about the size of mine. All right, we're just continuing to place 2 double crochets into every other stitch around. We have just a couple more sets left here, and here is our last V-stitch. So in this pattern, a V-stitch is 2 double crochets worked into 1 stitch, so that counts as a V-stitch. So really, a V-stitch is taking up 2 stitches, if that makes sense. So between my thumbs, that's counted as 1 V-stitch, even though it's made out of 2 stitches. So at this point, we should count and make sure that we have a total of 14 V-stitches. So this counts as the first one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, oh, we have 15. I think I added 1 V-stitch. Oh yeah, I did. See, this is why we have to check. If I had looked a little closer, I would have seen that that is where I had made that original chain 2 was in this stitch, and we had made a V-stitch here, and we should have skipped that last stitch This was actually a slip stitch right here, not a single crochet. And I didn't notice that. So that's, this is a great time to count and make sure you only have 14 V-stitches around, which we do. And then we're going to make a slip stitch into the top of that chain 2, that beginning chain 2, which is going to count as that first double crochet. So when you do that, normally we think of those 2 loops that form the V as being the top of the stitch. So we would put our hook underneath those 2 like this and make a slip stitch, which you can completely do. But if you find that to be fiddly, I usually find that to be kind of difficult to get my hook underneath both of those. Usually when I'm joining to a beginning chain like that, I will go underneath the second leg of the V, so back here, and then also underneath that loop that's on the bottom of the stitch. So I'm still going underneath 2 loops. Here, I'll show you. Right here, and then there's a loop right behind it, right there. So this, this doesn't really matter that much. You don't need to be that careful, but I find that it looks really good. And I feel like for a long time when I started crocheting and doing that join, I always thought that I was probably doing this wrong, but I wasn't sure if I should do it this way or not. And I've just decided, with crochet, like many other things, if it looks good to you, then you don't need to, you don't need to worry about it. If it's serving its function and it looks nice, then you just go for it. So that's what I'm doing there, making that slip stitch to the top of that chain 2. And then we're going to slip stitch in between that chain 2 and the first double crochet, which is right here. So I'm doing another slip stitch right there. And we're going to begin round number 2 of the V-stitch section. Oh, looks like we have some more hellos here. We've got a hi from Passion for Crochet. And we've got Mary who's viewing from Texas. Hi, Mary. Thanks for saying hello in there. And Barbara's watching from Maine. Thanks, you guys. I'm glad you guys are here. Okay, so we're going to start on round number 2, the beginning. We're going to start with a chain 2 again. So 1, 2, that's going to count as the first leg of the V-stitch or the first double crochet we make. Then we're going to make another double crochet right in between those 2 stitches. Okay, so in the middle of the V. I'm going to make a double crochet right there. So there's our very first V-stitch. Now we're going to look for the next V-stitch, which is right here, and we're going to work between this double crochet and this double crochet. All right, so not between, here's a V-stitch and here's a V-stitch. We're not working between the V-stitches, but we're working into the middle of each V-stitch right there. And we're placing 2 double crochets. So 1 and 2. Okay, and we're going to continue doing that all the way around. Just look for the V-stitch and then place 2 stitches, 2 double crochet stitches right into the middle of that V. So there's a V. We're going to put 2 double crochets right there. 1, 2. There's the next V. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. So we're just going to continue making a V-stitch into each V-stitch around, and then we will join at the end. All right, we have just a couple more left here. Here's our last V-stitch. So you can see what that looks like there. If I pull it apart, you can kind of see the V's just a little bit better. Okay. And there's the very first V-stitch that we did. So that was the beginning chain 2 plus a double crochet that formed that first V-stitch. And we're going to do a slip stitch into the top of that chain 2 to join. And then we're going to do, when we start our next round, we're going to start with a slip stitch right there between the chain 2 and the very first actual double crochet. And now we're situated at the center of the V, and we can do our 2 chains to chain up and then a double crochet. So again, we're repeating the same thing. So rounds 2 through 4. All right, so round number 1 was, let's see. Round number 1 was of the V-stitch section. Here, let me pull this back in here. Round number 1 of the V-stitch section was right here, and we've just done round number 2. So this is round number 3, and then we'll do one more round. That's round number 4 before we switch colors. But like I said before, you don't actually have to switch colors if you don't want to. You can work it all up in one color or variegated yarn or however you like. Or you can change the proportions too. I thought this would be nice. You know, if you have smaller scraps, you could just do one color in each, for each stripe, for each round. There's lots of room for customization. All right, I will finish up this round and show you that join one more time, and then we're going to skip ahead to the color change section. All right, I've got just one more V-stitch left right here. And then we're going to join to the top of that chain 2 from the very beginning of the round. And then to start the next round, we would make a slip stitch right into the center of that V and begin with our chain 2 and add a double crochet into the same V and then work our way around one more round. So we'll have a total of 4 V-stitches, or 4 rounds of V-stitches, I should say. And your piece will look like this. Looks like I have one more V-stitch left in this little piece here. So there's our last V-stitch. And then we would do our very last join in the top of that chain 2. And then we can go ahead and just fasten off. So that just means we just cut our yarn, leaving 4 to 6 inches or so, and just bring that through to knot that off. So there's the very bottom. So that's color 1. And then we're going to be ready for color number 2. So I'm going to use this lighter pink here. And to start, I will start with a slip knot on my hook, just like that. And then I will find that very first V-stitch of the round, so that's right where I fastened off, and I'm going to do a slip stitch right here. So I'm going to insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull that loop through the loop on our hook, like that. And now we're ready to chain 2, 1 and 2. And that's going to count as our very first double crochet. And we're going to do a second double crochet into that V, and we're going to continue doing that all the way around. So this makes it, once you get that V-stitch pattern set up, it's very easy to just do this without counting, without paying super close attention to what you're doing, because you can see where the V's are. I mean, if you're not looking at all, you might accidentally make a V in between V-stitches, but as long as you're glancing down a little bit here, you can tell where those V's all line up, and you can get your stitches centered in each V as you work your way around. So this makes a nice little kind of zigzaggy color change here, which I think looks really pretty. All right, so you just continue all the way around and do your slip stitch just like normal in the top of that chain 2. And then you're going to work up to, let's see, round number 10. Okay, so let's see here. Let me see how many we have here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, we'll do one more round here. And that would be round 10. Let me just double check. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and here's round number 10. Okay, so we'll slip stitch in the middle of the V, chain 2. I'm going to do this pretty quickly because you've seen this already. double crochet into the same spot, and then we make a V-stitch into each V-stitch around. And I chose this stitch pattern because it's just a little bit meshy, like there's some holes between the stitches, which is great because I wanted this to be able to dry out, you know, between uses and not just stay damp. But I didn't want to make it too meshy because I wanted people to be able to use this as a washcloth, you know, and have it be functional, but also I wanted it to keep any kind of dirt or debris from sticking to the soap from the outside. So I wanted it to protect the soap enough, but but have enough ventilation so that things could dry out between uses. So that is why I chose the stitch. Plus it's an easy one to work up, and I just I just really like how it makes those nice little vertical columns of V's, and I really like how it looks where the color changes from one to the next. All right, we have just a couple more of these left. Oh, Patsy says, good morning from New Mexico. Oh, thank you for the compliment. I love New Mexico. I like to go camping there. That's an area of the country that I've been to a lot, and it's just so beautiful there. Okay, so here is my beginning chain 2, and I'm going to make a slip stitch into that very top of the 2 chains there to join. And then we're on to round 11. Let's see, actually I renumbered so that we're doing the single crochet section at the top edge. Okay, so we're going to chain 1. So this is round number 1 of the single crochet section at the top edge. So we're going to chain 1. And that's not going to count as a stitch. We're not going to work into that chain. And we're going to make a single crochet into each double crochet around. So that includes the top of this chain 2 here. Okay, so right where we had done our slip stitch join, we're going to add a single crochet right into the top of that chain 2. So there's our first single crochet of the round. I'm going to place a stitch marker there so we can all see where that is. And then we're going to do a single crochet into each double crochet. And Darlene is saying hello from Texas. Darlene's watching from Texas, another place I like to camp. All right, so this first round of single crochet is probably going to bring the top of your bag in just ever so slightly, and that's normal. You can see it kind of pulling in just a little bit, and that helps keep the soap in there, as well as the little attachment at the top, which we'll get to in a minute. But just don't be, surprised by that. It's just because for most people, double crochets take up a little more space, especially these V-stitches take up a little more space widthwise than single crochets do usually. Okay. So let's see, let me just count my stitches. I believe, let's see, yeah, we should have 28 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. All right, we've got the right amount of stitches. And then at this point, you do not need to join anymore. We're just going to be working the last couple rounds in a spiral. So what that means is you're not going to do a slip stitch here into that first stitch, but instead we're just going to start with a single crochet because we're going to begin with round number 2. So we're going to single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. So here's 1, and we'll put our stitch marker back in. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then we're going to chain 40. So this is going to make the loop. And when you do this, if you tend to be a tight chainer, then you might want to switch to another like a one size up hook, because you know, you're going to have to work into those chains on your next round a little bit. So that might be frustrating if you have 40 hole chains of frustration. So switch to one size up if you need to. I'm just going to stay with the same hook size because I'm able to make my chains a little bit loose. So we're going to chain 40. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we've done half, and that should reach down to the bottom of your bag. If it doesn't, I would suggest either adding some more chains if you think you can, if it's not going to be too tight to work into, you can add some more chains. Or at that point, you can, if you feel like, oh, okay, maybe I did chain these kind of tightly, then you could just undo those, switch to a larger hook, and do that again. So you want it to reach to the bottom of your bag, because what we're doing is we're making a loop that's long enough to tuck the end of the bag through later so that you can hook it to something. I'll show you that a little bit more later when we get a little further, but you just want to kind of double check that. Once you're halfway through with your chains, once you're at 20, it should reach to the bottom of your bag. So we're going to do 20 more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. All right, so just make sure this isn't all twisted, in a spiral. Just make sure, just kind of lay it out, look at your chain, make sure it's not twisted, and then you're going to start your next stitch in the following stitch, which would be right here. And you're going to do a single crochet into each of the remaining stitches, into each of the next 13 stitches. Sorry about that, not the remaining stitches, but 13. So 1. Okay, so that stitch is right next door to the last single crochet we made before we did that chain loop. Okay, so just the next stitch that's available. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So we should be pretty much at the midpoint, almost at the midpoint of the opposite side of the bag here at this point. And then we're going to chain 3, and I make these, you can go ahead and make these tightly. So 1, 2, 3. You don't need to make those loose because we're not going to be working into each of those individual chains. And then we're going to skip 2 stitches. So there's our next stitch. So we're skipping this one, and we're skipping this one, and we're going to work a single crochet in each of the next 5 stitches, and that'll bring us to our beginning of round stitch marker. So 1, so you can see there's a little window that we made with those 3 chains, skipping 2 stitches. That's 1 single crochet, 2, 3, 4, and here's the 5th one. That's the end of our round, and now we're going to single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. So I'm going to place that stitch marker back in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And now we're going to do a slip stitch through the front loop of each of the next 40 chains. So if you're worried about getting in the front or the back, it really doesn't matter that much. I just liked how it looked when I worked into the front loop. So if you look at your chain, you can see all those little V's, and they're all going in this direction right here. They're all kind of stacked up in a line. We're just going to be going underneath the front loop of each. So that would be right here under just one strand of yarn. So to do that, we're just going to insert our hook, grab that yarn, pull through, and pull through the loop on the hook. And that kind of twisted our chain just a little bit, so now it's easier to see where that front loop is, or it's easier to get your hook into it. So I'm placing it like right above that horizontal dash into that front loop, like this. So we're just doing this to reinforce that chain a little, to make it a little bit more substantial, because you know, a bar of soap and a wet, presumably a wet washcloth here is going to be hanging from this loop at some point. So we want to make it nice and sturdy and smooth, and still pretty compact, so that we can send it through the little hole that's on the opposite side of the bag. So we're just going to be making these slip stitches all the way across this loop. And if you feel like this is, you know, making your chain really tight or somehow distorting it, you can change the hook size if you need to, in order to maintain, you know, the distance of the loop, or the length of your loop. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you just still want to be able to tuck the bag through the loop. So you can see this is making a nice cord. This is what it looks like. It looks very finished. I have just a few more left. And here's the very last front loop of the chain. And now we're back at our single crochets. So we can do a single crochet into each of the next 13 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then we're going to do 3 single crochets right into that chain space. So there's 1, 2, 3, or however many fits and looks nice. You know, it doesn't need to specifically be 3. And then we're going to just finish this out by doing 5 more single crochets. 2, 3, 4, and here's the 5th one. All right, so then we can just go ahead and cut our yarn, leaving 6 inches or so. And then I like to just do something called an invisible join. You certainly do not need to do this. This is kind of like extra credit. You could just pull that on through, just like that. And then we're going to put that on our yarn needle. And then I'm going to finish this off so it has a nice smooth edge. So I'm skipping the next stitch, which is right here. Okay, so if you pull up on this, you can see that little V on the front. That stitch has been used. This stitch is empty. We're going to go to the following stitch right there. And we're going to run our yarn from front to back under both loops like this. And we're going to pull until this loop right here looks about the size of any of these loops. So about like that. Then we're going to put our yarn back down from where it came out of, which is right here. And I'm going through the loop just below, so that way we can make what looks like is a fake stitch. Okay, so we just added one of those this little V between my thumbnails. Wasn't there before. That's what we did. So that makes the edge look super smooth, really tidy. You don't have that little knot or the join or sort of a jog there where you fastened off. This is absolutely not necessary, but little things like this just kind of make me happy to make it look just a little bit extra polished, I guess. You know, it takes an extra couple seconds to do, but once you kind of get into the practice of doing this all the time, which I usually do for things I make in the round, it just sort of becomes second nature and you don't even notice it. Except for that little part of complete satisfaction when you see what a perfect edge you just made. Oh, it's the little things, you guys. Okay, so then you're going to weave in your end like I just did, a couple of different directions. Remember, this is going to be handled a lot, hopefully, you know, used a lot. And so you want to weave it back and forth in at least 2 or 3 directions just so that end is not going to pop out. And then you just have a couple ends left in the bottom for where we changed colors that you can go ahead and weave in there. And when you're weaving in your ends to something like, you know, this V-stitch, something that's kind of meshy, just sort of keep in mind that you want it to follow along with your stitches and be in the same color, of course, as your stitches. I brought a yarn needle today that has a very small hole in it. Okay, we're gonna do this trick. Hopefully this will work. So if you fold your yarn in half and make a little tiny nubbin, then you can slide that little folded part through your needle. It's usually easier to thread that way. So you don't have that frayed edge trying to shove through the hole there. Okay, so I'm gonna just sort of follow this up, and since this is likely gonna be stretching somewhat, you know, just be mindful of that. Don't pull it too tight. Allow it to have that extra little stretch, because when it gets wet, it's gonna, you know, be heavy with the soap in there. Weave it back and forth in a couple of directions here, and it's great if you can split through your yarns, because, you know, a little bit here going straight through and into those strands of yarn, like right through the middle of those strands of yarn, because that tends to pull out a little bit less. You know, it'll stay hidden a little bit better. So you do the same with your other yarn tails. Go ahead and weave those in, and then you're finished. You can block these if you want. I don't normally block these. I feel like they don't really need it. You just put a bar of soap in there, and it looks great. So let me just show you how this works. So, you know, any standard size bar soap, or even like the larger soaps, like if you wanted to make this as a gift for somebody and buy one of those fancy larger bars of soap that sometimes you see at co-ops and things like that, those still fit in here as well. You can tuck it in, and then you use the loop and send it from the inside to the outside through the little hole, and that closes the top of your, you know, your little sack, so that way your soap is not going to fall out. And then you would be able to attach this to, you know, a strap in a backpack or something like that. This is a little bit unconventional, but I'm going to show you on this yarn bowl here, because I happen to have, there's a hole right there. So if you had a strap or something, you could send the end of your backpack underneath the strap, and then you just tuck the end through that loop like this, and then you have it attached and it can hang and dry out. So you can do that, you know, for something in the shower, or like I said, if you're traveling, you know, it's great to be able to hook it onto something, belt loop, backpack, something like that, just so it can be outside and dry off. All right, let me just check in here, see if I missed anything. Oh, we did. Katrina says going to make this, and good morning from Ontario, Canada. Hi, Katrina. And we have a saludos desde Panama. I think that means hello, but I'm not from Panama, I think. Hopefully I'm right on that. Hello, Jacqueline. I'm glad you said hi. Oh, and thank you for the compliment, Countess Gamble. All right. And morning. We got a morning from Katrina. All right, thanks you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. If anybody is interested in learning what to do with granny squares, if you're a granny square fan, like I'm a big granny square fan, I'm gonna be having another live tutorial, or like basically a little show and tell session. And that's gonna start at 11:30 Central Time. So in about a little bit more than a half an hour. So if you can come back, if you're interested in learning what to do with all those granny squares. I got lots of ideas for you guys. All right, thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate you guys saying hi and being here. I hope you guys enjoy making your soap sacks. I hope that you consider donating some as well as making some for yourself. Thank you, everybody. Bye.